Welcome to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Anthony Cannella. He's a member of the California State Senate. And so I want to talk to you about what we know as prison realignment. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court a couple of years back ruled that California prisons were being operated in a cruel and unusual fashion and ordered that the state decrease its prison population. It didn't order that it set prisoners free willy-nilly, but it was very specific. You have some concerns, though, about how realignment, which was the governor's proposal to address the Supreme Court's concerns, has been effectuated.
Yeah, and I'm not going to debate the merits of realignment because that's settled law, that's done, it's moving forward. My concern comes with the way that it's funded. And I have two concerns. The first concern is that when the bill was in the Senate and in the various committees, the author and other proponents of realignment said, look, this is not about saving money for the state of California. We're not trying to save money. We just believe local government can do a better job when it comes to these services, specifically realignment, and we want them to be able to do that. So it was never about saving money. Now, lo and behold, the state of California is saving about $2 billion a year because they've moved about 30,000 prisoners or 40,000 prisoners to county jail. And so the state's saving $2 billion, yet they're only giving the counties $800 million to fund their operations.
So is it your view that the counties are being underfunded? Forget equitable distribution. We'll talk about that in a moment. But as a general proposition, do you believe California's 58 counties who are taking these lower level offenders are not getting enough revenue to provide for these low level prisoners?
I do believe that. And again, lower level offenders, these aren't folks who stole bread. These are still offenders.
They are.
They just happen to be lower on the scale than some in state prison. So yes, I believe that they're being underfunded, especially when you look at the county jails. The county jails weren't set up to house people for a lengthy period of time.
Right.
I heard one prisoner that's going to be in county jail for 27 years.
Yes.
So that's a problem because the counties aren't set up to provide educational opportunities, vocational training, mental health.
Wasn't that the hope and dream behind realignment, is that if you're serving in your home county, because if you went to state prison, you could be anywhere in the state. You could even be out of the state. That you would be able to have the easier transition when you leave the system, and those would be in place locally.
Well, and I think from a support standpoint, if the families are close by, I think that's helpful. But if they get out of county jail after serving 4 years and they don't have their GED, or if they have mental health problems, they don't get the help they need, if they don't learn how to get a skill through vocational training, then likely they're going to come out of county jail and they're going to reoffend. So I believe that the counties need more money to build up these systems, just like the state prison has had many decades to do that.
And it's interesting, there are, I think, 33 state prisons, and presumably those state prisons have an infrastructure for the programs you've described. We have 58 counties. I presume that each county jail doesn't have the infrastructure you described.
I think they're doing the best they can. I think they're looking to nonprofits to help, but at some point, if it's about trying to help these prisoners make better life choices and get back out and be productive citizens, they have to have the infrastructure. Also, we need to build more bed space. I mean, the reality is most of these county jails are now, they've got a crowding problem, and the same federal judge is going to go to the counties and force them to.
Some counties are under federal court order as it is. But you mentioned bed space, and there's a whole discussion about whether we should be spending more money on prisons vis-a-vis education, but is it time for California to look at prison construction?
I absolutely believe so. I mean, I don't think it should be a debate on whether we invest in education or prisons. I mean, we need to do both, right? If people commit crimes, they need to go to jail or go to prison and do their time, and we need to get them off the street. So it's these folks that are in jail, what do we do? And I think we need to build bed space. We need to provide these other programs that the state prison has done, and they need more money. $800 million when the state's saving $2 billion, I think that's wrong.
Let's continue the conversation. For our viewers on HLN, we thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. But I want to talk to you as well, Anthony, about the question of equitable distribution of realignment dollars. I know that a group of you sent a letter to the governor. I think it was leading the charge was former Senator Michael Rubio and yourself, Democrat, Republican, indicating that if you look at the way that AB 109 dollars are being allocated, there are certain counties, especially Central Valley counties, that are not getting the same amount of money as larger urban counties. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. In fact, the Fresno Bee reported that in Fresno County, the money they get from the state is about $12,000 per realigned offender, but Contra Costa County gets $40,000 per realigned offender.
Why?
Well, I don't know why. I don't think it's fair. I mean, the reality is...
But I understand, but honestly, why? I don't understand. Why would that be? I mean, a prisoner is a prisoner, a prisoner, a county is a... What is it? Is it cost of living? I don't understand why that would be.
The arguments that these counties made, Marin County, Contra Costa County, San Francisco, is they had more diversion programs in place. Therefore, they weren't sending as many people to county jail, and they needed to be able to continue those programs.
But doesn't that beg the question of what you were talking about earlier, which is these other counties need to be able to create diversion programs?
We do, and I think part of the problem for Marin County, for example, I mean, that's a very wealthy community, and so they have other things that are in their benefit versus some of the counties that I represent that have a tougher time. And so, but an offender is an offender.
Right.
It doesn't, and they need equitable money to house these offenders.
And so what I'm wondering is, do you have a bill that simply says each county will get X dollars per offender under the AB 109 plan, period? Doesn't matter what county you're in.
Right, yeah. So my bill, SB 144, it does two things. It deals with, I believe, the inequity. When the state's saving $2 billion, I think they should give that money to the counties to implement realignment, number one. Number two, it takes that additional money and says, this money will be distributed to the counties based on offenders. So for example, in schools, we fund schools per average daily attendance. It should be the same thing with offenders. If you've got 100 offenders, you get that share of money. So I think it's important. I know for the counties that I represent, they're struggling to do their job and they need more money.
How does Prop 30's passage impact this? Of course, Prop 30 passed in November. Most people focus on the education side of it. But as I understand it, sir, part of Prop 30 was a constitutional guarantee for prison realignment funding.
Right. So now that was one of the concerns with the original realignment. There was no constitutional guarantee that money would go to the counties. Now with Prop 30, that happens. But it doesn't give a floor or a ceiling. It just says that money will go. So I would say that Prop 30 has helped because I think Prop 30, regardless of one's view on taxes, it's taken a burden off the state budget. In fact, it's a $50 billion tax. In year 7 of this tax, it's estimated the state of California will have a $9 billion surplus. So I think there's more money to fund important programs, education, and I think public safety as well. So I think we need to get more money to the counties.
I may be going a bit off topic, and if you're not familiar with this area, forgive me, just say I'm not sure. But as you know, the federal sequester has kicked in. And some monies that will be eliminated because of the federal sequester are criminal justice programs. And so have you been briefed or have a sense as to what California is going to do if this sequester moves forward?
You know, I haven't been briefed on that. Right. And it's my hope that Congress will come together and figure out a better way to make cuts. I do think cuts need to be made. It's just you shouldn't cut programs that are vital for public safety.
So let's go back to this issue about equitable distribution, excess savings, I guess you could say. You did have 12 Central Valley legislators sign this bill, or excuse me, this letter to the governor, Democrats and Republicans, Assembly and Senate. Where are we in the process?
Well, I think, I've got my bill, which is a better distribution. We're in talks with the administration on how we can better fund. I think the governor's committed to realignment.
Is your bill focused exclusively on the equitable distribution side?
It's
also the $2 billion.
So it's funding it properly, which the savings from the state, and then secondly, it's a better formula for distribution to the counties.
You got some friends in the Assembly carrying a similar bill.
Well, I've got a Democratic Assembly member who's co-signed onto my bill, and so I think this isn't a Republican Democrat thing.
I understand.
This is
I'm just saying,
a geographic
on the Assembly side. I mean, it's going. There's a dual track marching through the process.
Yeah, I think because this is important. This is an important bill.
On the $2 billion, though, I do want to ask. Intuitively, it makes sense that if we are saving $2 billion, but we also have had a lot of cuts over the last few years. And could one argue that we should be using that money to fill the holes that have been cut over the last 5 years and sending it to prisons where they should be not living the life anyway?
Well, first of all, it's not being sent to prisons. It'd be sent to the county jails, who are required by law because of AB 109 to house these offenders. All I'm trying to do is give them the necessary resources to do their job right. They need to hire more correctional officers. They need probation officers. They need, to develop various programs.
His name is Anthony Cannella, member of the California State Senate. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Jim Patterson, a member of the California State Assembly, on similar issues relating to prison realignment. I'm Brian Pomerance. This is California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you for joining us. Our guest, Jim Patterson, one of the newest members of the California State Assembly. How's your new job?
Thank you.
How is it?
I love it.
Right.
It's a real honor to serve the people of Central California, and I think it's an honor when people check the box by your name. And
it is quite
and
remarkable,
vote.
I can imagine.
It's a piece of their soul, and
Literally.
I take that very, very seriously. And I really love going to work in a building that is a museum. The Capitol building is absolutely gorgeous.
And you had worked in media, still work in media on the radio side.
Yes.
So how is it on the other side, if you know what I'm saying? Not this side of the table, but your side of the table in comparison.
Well, I have to answer the tough questions now. I don't get to ask the tough questions.
Fair enough.
I enjoy it.
Well, let's talk about some tough questions, and that deals with GPS bracelets, which in a lot of ways have been seen as a real advancement in crime prevention. The challenge, though, is that with what we call as realignment, some of these post-conviction releasees are cutting off their GPS bracelets. Tell us about the problem.
Let me, first of all, take a step back and say, I think realignment needs to be realigned. I think we have a serious problem in Central California with our local jails filling up with realigned prisoners.
And let's talk about
then
that.
We have to let them, then we have to let the harder criminals than we like go. And those are on GPS monitoring. They're cutting the GPS monitoring off. And what they're doing is that they're going out and they're not enrolling in school
in Bible study,
or going to work.
Let me ask you about realignment, because we recently spoke with Anthony Cannella, member of the California State Senate, and he has been very outspoken about the fact that, especially in the Central Valley, counties are getting shortchanged in terms of per prisoner allotment vis-a-vis the larger urban counties, and he's looking for equitable funding for AB 109 prisoners.
Well, I joined with the senator and others in a letter to the governor, basically stating those same kind of concerns. So I applaud the senator.
And these are bipartisan.
Absolutely. But I might be a little bit tougher than some. I think this was a mistake. I think that it has created a revolving door at our county jails, and it has done nothing but release more violent criminals, and we're seeing spikes in all kinds of crimes.
But here's the challenge. We know what the U.S. Supreme Court said. They were very clear that California's prisons were being operated in a cruel and unusual fashion, that it was causing needless death and suffering. And this was not, a, quote, liberal decision. It was a kind of consensus decision, and they ordered that California decrease its prison population. What was California to do, or what is California to do?
Well, I don't think California ought to be dumping its prison overcrowding population problems on the counties and doing it with dirt cheap remunerations. The result of that has been a real serious crime spike in all areas of Central California.
And you're not alone. But what do we do? I mean, it's an easy question to ask, but what do we do with the Supreme Court order hanging over our head?
Look, it's not going to be solved overnight.
Right.
But let's recognize that the first order of business of organized government is public safety. And we just simply can't throw up our arms and say, well, the Supreme Court has ordered, so therefore we're going to live under this. I think we do have to raise capacities. I think we do have to make sure that we have places to put people.
You're not alone. The challenge is, how do we get to a place where California can start spending money on prison construction?
Well, I think that if we actually decide, as the governor has asked, to be responsible with our spending, if we stop the, I think there's a terrible go-around with the way in which the state recently has borrowed and spent.
Let's
get it
talk
under
more
control.
about this. Let's talk more about this. Thank you for joining us on HLN. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, Assembly member, I do want to go back, though, to the GPS bracelet issue, because we've read a lot about it in the Los Angeles Times, I think the Oakland Tribune, that what's happening is those individuals that are being placed with GPS bracelets, especially those that had sex offenses, they are cutting off their bracelets. The problem is that offense under realignment is an offense that sends you to the counties. The county jails are impacted, so the prisoners are, those that cut off the bracelets, even if caught, are not serving time in the counties, so they're rolling the dice, cutting off their bracelets, and there's no consequence.
Senator Lieu is putting forth a bill. I have a bill, AB 63. It basically says if you cut off the GPS, we're going to charge you with a felony and you are going to go back to state jail. Now, I understand the difficulties with some of that, but it is the reality of the failed realignment that has to be addressed when it comes to about 1,200 of these prisoners who have been cutting off their bracelets across the state. And when you come right back to it, the problem I have is, look, I'm a dad, and one of these prisoners cut their bracelet off, went to the library at Fresno State, and molested a student. Right. Now that's absolutely unacceptable, and the prison system has to recognize it, and I think making it a felony instead of just a slap on the wrist will give all of these criminals a pause, a second opportunity to say, I'm not going to cut it off.
And is that your belief? Because in some ways it's a cost-benefit analysis. If the prisoners keep cutting them off, that means they're going to go back to state prison. That means our prison population increases. That means we're at risk of violating Supreme Court order. Or do you believe that when they learn that if I cut this off, I'm going back for at least 3 years, I'm not going to cut it off?
I think there has to be a penalty to an action. And I think that we have to understand that we're not talking about huge numbers here, but the recidivism rates and the crime that they create is very important. There's about 1,200 that have cut them off. And if we caught all of them
and that may be low.
And sent them back to state prison, we're not going to break the state prison ability to, I think, do what the Supreme Court said it needs to do. We're not sending 30,000 people back. Right. We're going to send 1,000 or 1,200 if we catch them.
So here we have Republican Jim Patterson from the Central Valley supporting this, Democrat Ted Lieu from Los Angeles supporting this. This seems like a recipe for a bipartisan bill that can pass. Where are we?
So. Well, I'll just say this. I don't care that my bill passes. What I care about is that a bill passes.
But that's what I'm saying.
If the senator's bill, because up here Democrats really kind of run the joint, let's recognize that. And if a Democrat Senate bill like AB 63, my bill, gets through, I'm glad to say thank you, Senator. I'll sign on. And we'll just get it done.
But is it time, for example, for you to reach out to Senator Lieu and say, hey, let's get together now. Let's draft the same language together. Here's an example of bipartisanship. Because if you both have the same bill and they're going through, there's no conference. And
we've essentially done that, and we have relied on the California Attorney General's Association to help us with the language and the law and all of that. Our bill is, I think, a little more detailed. And I think that as the senator's bill develops, I think we'll see similarities, and I think at the right time, we join together.
What about the GPS technology generally? Because part of people's concern is that because of this unfortunate set of circumstances, the society will kind of turn against GPS technology when in a lot of ways it still can be very effective. I mean, it's a tool that can be used. Or do you disagree?
I would like to think that technology can help us, but it just seems like that the criminal mind comes up with all kinds of ways to defeat efforts, and whether the technology is good, bad, or indifferent, it's being cut off, and the consequences aren't with the technology. The consequences are those criminals are going into our communities, stealing our cars, molesting women at university libraries, and killing people on the streets. That's absolutely unacceptable.
Right. Are you confident that this bill will make it through the Assembly, make it through the Senate, get signed by the governor?
I don't know about that, but I'm confident that with Democrat support primarily, I do think that some kind of bill like this will get through the Senate. I hope it will get through the Assembly, and if it gets to the governor's desk, I hope he will sign it. I'm going to work hard at it, and I think a lot of people are joining in the support.
His name is Jim Patterson. He is a member of the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition. This is California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Brian Dahle, member of the California State Assembly, representing beautiful areas of our great state in Northern California. And I mean way northern, not San Francisco, even above San Francisco and east a bit.
Yep. We represent 9 counties up in the northeastern part of the state.
And talk to us about the beauty of rural California and the challenges facing rural California.
You know, it's a great place for most of Californians come to recreate in our areas, and we get a lot of natural resources from my assembly district. Most of the people that come up there are used to looking at the beauty, but we are challenged with trying to provide health care in our districts. And the reason that it's challenging is that we don't have the population base to really, as we do in the urban areas, to cost shift. And those are the issues that we're faced with in the rural areas.
And I know one of your colleagues, Dan Logue, had been a big booster of what's known as a telehealth bill, which would allow medicine to be delivered via internet, via telephone, at equitable reimbursement rates. And that seems to be a plan, got bipartisan support, signed by the governor. So there's some relief.
Yes, well, that makes sense in most areas, but when you still need a hospital there, you still need the ability to have an emergency room when you have an accident, you have people who come and climb our beautiful mountains, get hurt. We need a place for them.
So let's talk about a very specific challenge facing rural California, and that deals with the question of skilled nursing facilities. It's a bit inside baseball, but talk to us about what's happened as a result of a budget fix before you joined the Assembly.
So Assembly Bill 97 cut Medicare reimbursement rates by 10% across the board, all of California, which helped the general fund out, and it was done in last year's budget. So how that affects the rural part of the state and the hospitals that we have is we have our skilled nursing facilities next to our hospitals, so they're integrated together. So and then on top of that, they wanted to go back and collect the money.
And they are.
So they are. They're attempting to come back and collect the money. That's where we have the big issue, is that we will not be able to pay back and fund what the process that comes.
This is dramatic as you describe it. I mean, this is not just, a minor cut. As it stands today, for example, there's a skilled nursing facility in Shasta County, right near your home of Lassen County. There could be a cut of over $55 a day when you're only spending $259 a day.
Right. So our facility there in Shasta, Mayor's Memorial Hospital, is at $259. The state rate is $295. The average state rate is $295. So we're already doing a better job than the state now, and they're proposing to cut us by $59. And it simply will shut down our skilled nursing, long-term care part of our hospital, which then would impact the original hospital, which is next door. They're tied together.
And explain that. I think that's a key element, because one could argue, oh, you close the skilled nursing facility, not a big deal. They'll go elsewhere. But the ramifications, the ripple effect is dramatic.
Right, and we've done a good job of condensing, combining, and holding. It's the glue that holds it together. So those folks, if we close the skilled nursing, would have to go to San Jose or San Diego, a long ways from where they live in the true northern part of the state.
Literally.
So if we lose that, we lose our hospital, and that's the glue really that holds our little communities together. And want to make sure that when people come to visit our areas and enjoy the beautiful North State, there's a hospital there if they get injured, and we need those for our local community.
It's a challenge because, look, there are 80 members of the Assembly, 40 in the Senate. Most of them represent urban areas. You're screaming, please help us in rural California, but there just aren't that many of you to be advocates for rural California.
Right. There is another hospital in the Bay Area. I think it's a Jewish Health Center there that has faced with the same situation, but very few out there. But it's mainly the northeastern rural hospitals that are being
When we
affected.
come back, I want to talk more about this, because this is a pivotal issue for Californians. His name is Brian Dahle from the California State Assembly. For our viewers on HLN, thank you for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So, sir, given that you do have some urban cousins in this fight, I mean, can you turn this into an issue that isn't so parochial, I guess you could say?
Well, I'm working with those members who have the same issue. Basically, what we need to be able is to carve out for the rural areas. We need to relax the regulations some, definitely not make them go back and pay back what they've already been paid.
It's almost like realignment. I mean, or I misspoke, redevelopment, where with redevelopment you have to send money back to the state that was sitting in your coffers. It's painful. It's
very painful, and it just doesn't make good business sense. And so if we could relieve that, that would at least give us some footing to continue to say, if they come back and need that immediately, we will lose our long-term care, and our hospitals are in jeopardy.
So how does the Affordable Care Act impact this issue? Of course, that's what's known as Obamacare. Is there a correlation, or is this really a homegrown problem?
The Obamacare is going to add more people onto the Medicare reimbursement rate.
Right.
It's going to broaden the rolls. We're simply
So is that good or bad for this, or just irrelevant for this?
Well, it's two different
Right.
situations. I mean, but it can compound it if we continue to add people and we can't even take care of the ones that we have on there. So that's the part that we're concerned about.
We do know that Governor Brown and the state, really starting with Governor Schwarzenegger, has opted to accept the additional funding for Medicaid expansion, Medi-Cal expansion. Is that impact here? We're dealing with a Medicare issue, correct? There's too many metas in
You're
here.
right.
But
Let me just narrow it down.
Please.
What really is happening to us right now is we need to make sure that we are treated fairly, not have to retroactively pay back the money. And we're already doing it for a cheaper rate than the state. And so I think that because we've been doing a good job, we shouldn't be penalized for doing a good job.
And it's funny, the fact that I'm throwing out all these questions just demonstrates how complicated this really is. Because if you would have told me this, in the hallway, I would have said, oh, it's an Obamacare issue, and it has nothing to do with...
Separate issue.
Completely separate issue. At the same time, I know that the rural counties are feeling frustrated by another issue dealing with fire protection, fire safety. And it gets further complicated by the fact that CAL FIRE has been kind of embroiled in a mini scandal similar to what happened with the park system, where money may or may not have been used. I don't know. But do talk to us about the CAL FIRE tax.
Well, I want to talk to you about they call it the state responsibility areas, which if you live in those areas, you are assessed a fee for your parcel per dwelling. It's $150, which was retroactive, by the way. You had to catch up, so they're getting two bills. I believe that's unconstitutional myself. If you pay income tax, you're paying into the state general fund, which is to take care of CAL FIRE. Your local fire district you pay into, which takes care of your fire, and now there's a third tax on there. You're getting double taxed, which I believe is unconstitutional.
How would you respond to those that would say, if one chooses to live in a higher fire zone, higher risk fire zone, that you should bear part of the financial responsibility and pay a little more? I'm sure you've heard
that.
This
sounds like a great argument, but if you already live in those higher zoned areas, and you have a fire district that you pay into, you're taking care of that. So you're getting an additional tax on top of that to help offset the state's CAL FIRE's budget.
Now we know, and
so the argument would be everybody in California should pay that fee, not just the rural folks.
So we know that there are court cases pending challenging this. We don't know what will happen there, but we also know that you are not alone in your frustration with this issue. There have been a lot of members who are trying to get this reversed. Where do we stand on the legislative side? The judicial side we'll put aside for now.
I believe there's two bills out right now that are asking to do away with the fire fee, and so they're working through the process right now.
Do you feel as if you can get the kind of bipartisan support you would need to get this bill reversed? Because in the final analysis, I mean, look, there is an argument that the state's doing better. Arguably, we're in the black now. Maybe we can undo this tax that seems to be causing a lot of consternation. I see you're smiling at me.
I would be happy to talk about that, and I'd like to do it. It makes sense, and I think it's unconstitutional.
But there are Democrats that represent rural areas. It's not as if it doesn't have to be a Democrat-Republican issue. And with the state arguably in the black, can this become an example of bipartisan agreement?
I certainly hope so.
Have you heard anything about that?
And I've been working with those members who have the SRA areas in their district that are from the other side of the island. And they would agree. We'll find out here pretty quick. There's some bills, and we'll see if they get out of committee and we can move forward.
They're receptive?
At the end of the day, we have to balance the budget.
I hear you.
And then there's a lot of tough decisions in that process, and I know how difficult those are.
His name is Brian Dahle, member of the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.